Hi, and welcome to another demo. In this demo, we will show how we can use a technology called logical volume management in Linux. Uh, it it is a newer technology that the whole purpose of it is to help us uh, partition our disk in a more flexible and better way than the old way of doing it. We've already shown in other demos how we do traditional Linux partitioning, but there are drawbacks with it. Usually it requires the system administrator to know in advance, for example, the size, the space that we need, the space that the partition will need. And once it's created, it's very hard. It requires a lot of work in order to expand it, or um, usually so it's difficult. It's not possible to expand it. If that partition gets filled up, we need to create a new partition and try to migrate the data from the old partition to the new partition. That is cumbersome, and we will try to avoid that by using, for example, this new technology. This which is a logical volume management, which is a much more flexible way of managing a disk. So let's suppose that we have some disk attached to our system, and of course we're much familiar with the fdisk command now with the -l option. Let's use that to check what disks that are available. We see that we have device disk SDA, SDB, SDC, and SDD. Four disks, one, two, three, four. One is already partitioned, while the rest are not partitioned. Okay, see that the system has four disks. Uh, SDA, SDB, SDC, and SDD, and SDA has three partitions already. A disk that's containing a partition, um, a disk that does not contain any partition will just have some metadata, but it will not show any partitions at all. While a disk that has partition will show that it has partitions. All right, that's the difference. Now let's suppose that we want to use those three disks that are unpartitioned, and we want to use them in a wise way by using logical volume management. Well, on the lab machines, the LVM package might be installed. If it's not installed, since we're using an Ubuntu distribution, all you need to do is issue the command sudo apt install LVM2. All right. Once the software is installed, once we have it in place, then we can use the LVM command, but directly on the disks. But the better way is to prepare the disk for LVM. Basically, give fdisk some information, a metadata that it contains in the disk, telling it that this disk will be used for LVM, for example. Partition it, and prepare it for LVM. In the previous assignment, we did this manually. We don't need to do that here because here we will just create one partition, one whole partition, and for that purpose, we will use the sfdisk command, which makes it easier for us to partition the whole disk with one command or a script. Okay, let's do the first device. Of course, as I said, this can be done with one line or scripted. Okay, this is what we do with one line. We say we want to create the type 8E, which is logical LVM, pipe it to sfdisk, which requires root privileges. That's why we're using sudo. And this is the device that we want to partition. And hey, the command does that for us. It says partition and writes the partition table. All right, let's do this for the two other disks as well. We did that, same thing. We did this, the same thing. Okay, we're done with partitioning the disk for LVM. Now we can use fdisk again uh, to check the partitions. We see the partitions are there. SDB, which is 10 gigabyte, and SDC, which is 10 gigabyte, and SDD, which is 10 gigabyte. All of them are partitioned with one partition, one large part. The whole disk is partitioned as you see 10 gigabyte as LVM, as LVM, as LVM. All right. Uh, the disks are now ready. Now we can use LVM commands to to create logical volumes. But the first thing that we need to do before we create logical volumes, because LVM has three layers, three steps. The first thing that we need to do is create what's called a physical volume. All right, by here we're telling it to create a PV create physical volume create, and saying that create by acquiring all these three disks. These three disk partitions will be part of the physical volume, and it says created successfully. The next thing we need to do is create the volume group. That's the next layer, the next step. It's way of grouping, disks, because we can have several disks, several volume groups. In this case, we're saying that this volume group will also acquire all the three. It doesn't necessarily have to do that. One volume group could have this too, while the other one could. But to make it simpler for us, we'll say the volume group VG1, the name that we give it to. This name can be whatever name that you want. It doesn't have to be VG1, but for the demo we call it VG1. Okay, and acquire these three disks, and it has created it successfully. Good. Now there comes the most important part, which is the partition, the logical volume, the logical partition, where we will have our file systems and files. All right. Uh, we can use any name that we want, but for this demo we will use LV1. All right. And we have to specify the size and the volume group that it belongs to. In this demo, we will specify a size of 2 gigabyte, and we'll say that this volume group that we are creating belongs to the VG1 group. All right, there we have it. Logical volume create, LV create, minus L, the size, 2 gigabytes, minus name, LV1, and it's on volume group 1. Created. Very good. Now let's display some information about the different parts, the physical volume, the volume group, and so on. First, let's display information about the physical volume. We see that it it, it has these three disks that are members of it. Good. Now let's display some information about the volume group. It says VG1, format LVM2, and some metadata. But the size is, because it combines all the three disks, the size is about 30 gigabytes. All right. Now let's display some information about the logical volume itself, LV. It says that it's on device VG1, its name is LV1, and some metadata, and its size is 2 gigabytes. Okay, very good. So far, so good. What can we do with this? Once we have a logical volume in place, we can put a file system just like a partition. We can put a file system and put our files on there. The good thing with the logical volumes are that we can extend it and we can shrink it on the fly without rebooting the system. All right. And yeah, this concludes the demo. Great. Uh, Bye bye.